Thank you for your patience, everyone. We are live.
Good evening, everybody. Go ahead and call the June meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors to order. I'm David Kaplan. I'm the chair of the board. We'll go ahead and read the electronic meeting notice.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, this meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors is being held electronically pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2 A3, the Continuity of Government Ordinance, adopted by the Alexandria City Council on June 20, 2020, or Section 4-0.01G, in HB29 and HB30, as enacted by the 2020 Virginia General Assembly, Virginia Acts of Assembly Chapters 1283 and 1289, to undertake essential business. All members of the board and staff are participating from remote locations through a Zoom meeting. This meeting continues to be held electronically, unless a determination is made that it is safe enough to be held in person at the Alexandria Transit Company Boardroom, 3000 Business Center Drive, Alexandria, Virginia. Electronic access will be provided in either event. The meeting can be accessed live via Zoom and Facebook. Recordings are posted on YouTube and the Dash website. Public comment will be accepted via Zoom. A Zoom registration link is available on the Dash website. Alternatively, requests for public comment can be made during the public comment period by utilizing the raise hand feature. This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, I'm going to ask the clerk of the board to go ahead and call the roll.
Chairman Kaplan,
Here.
Vice Chairman Kleist,
Here.
Ms. Bailey, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Chambers, Ms. Collins,
Here.
Mr. Greaves,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
Here.
Mr. Kapsis,
Here.
Ms. Thomas.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum. The following members are currently absent: Ms. Bailey, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Chambers, and Ms. Orr.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I would note that Mr. Bennett and Mr. Chambers have notified us that they would need excused absences for this evening due to work and childcare commitments. So hopefully the other members will be joining us soon.
Thank you.
And take note of the public meeting rules regarding cameras, audio, and how to provide feedback for members of the public, and the fact that this meeting is being recorded. We'll move on to the public comment period. We'd like to hear from any of our guests who wish to speak to the board about Dash or any city transit issue. Speakers have 3 minutes. Speakers may either have notified staff that they wish to speak in advance, or we will also pause and ask if there are any speakers on the meeting who would like to be heard. So I'll ask first if we had anybody pre-register.
We do, Mr. Chairman. We have 2 attendees who have pre-registered to provide public comment. The first name that I have is Bill Pugh.
All right, we'll go ahead and unmute Mr. Q and we'll hear from you. Just Mr. Q, before you begin, just take note on the screen that we have a hourglass that times your 3 minutes. So you will be able to see that when it has expired. And we'll start your clock when you begin speaking.
Hi, good evening, board members. My name is Bill Pugh. I'm an Alexandria resident, and I am excited to be using Dash more often now that things are opening up. And I'm especially excited with the free fare pilot and the redesign of the network that'll take effect in September. One thing I think will be very critical is making the app so it's very user-friendly and provides one-click information for real-time arrival. I recently downloaded it, and I know the original design of the app was really for the fare payment function, which was a great thing for Dash to do to make it more convenient for different types of riders. But right now it takes about 5 to 7 clicks to get to the real-time arrival information. And I have neighbors who I would love to tell them, just download this app and it'll tell you exactly when the bus is arriving. Even though the stop's a block away, we have a number of neighbors who are always very hesitant to use the bus unless we give them very easy information. So it's just an example. I think this may be something in the works, but just wanted to note it and look forward to the plans as they get closer to the fall, and hope you'll consider either some tweaks to the app or a new app or other private app that has good dash information for arrivals and routes. So that's all my comment, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bill. I'll let staff, if they want to respond and talk about any updates that we're making to the Dash real-time tracker. But I would ask if you're familiar with an app that's called Transit, because it has all the information, not just for Dash routes of real-time arrival, but also WMATA. It also has, Connector, any of the other local services that might intersect, and you can even see where the Capital Bike Share stations are and the availability of bikes. And I think even one of the rideshare services, Via, will tell you how far away one of their vehicles are. And it's free to, I have a Android phone, and it's free to download from the Google Play Store. I know it's on Apple too. So that's probably the best place if you want everything at your fingertips. And it works in other cities too. I use it when I travel.
Okay, we'll check it out.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Martin Barn, Director of Planning and Marketing. I would just note that we also have a website, a bus tracker website, which is optimized for mobile. It's dashbus.com/tracker. We made some upgrades to that last year, and it's very user-friendly and also a good site for Dash real-time information on your mobile device or your desktop.
Thanks, Martin. And Whitney will recognize our second speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second speaker is Adam Afnan, but it doesn't look like he's in attendance this evening.
Okay, Adam, if you're on the call, if you're on the Zoom, if you would go ahead and raise your hand so staff can see you, using the raise hand function. Still nothing?
Still no hands raised. But if there is anyone else in attendance who would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand function at this time.
We'll pause for a minute to see.
I do not see any raised hands, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment then. Next item of business is review and consideration of the consideration and approval of the May meeting minutes, which were included in our board packet. Are there any revisions to the minutes? If not, we'll entertain a motion to adopt them.
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the minutes from our May meeting.
Moved by Matt. Is there a
Mr.
second?
Mr. Chair, second the motion.
Thank you. All right, we'll give it to Steve. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed, any abstentions? Minutes stand approved. We'll move on to the board member announcements, reports, and business items. The chairman's report is first. I don't have much to report this month. I do want to, at the beginning of the meeting, as opposed to the end, to wish all of you a wonderful summer and to enjoy our recess. And just to reflect very briefly on the year that we've had, this has been an interesting term, to say the least. We started really in the fall, sort of still dealing with major impacts of COVID and a lot that we still didn't know. There were no vaccinations yet, and the ridership remained very low. We weren't sure about whether additional federal support was going to come through, and we're looking at potentially some significant cuts that were needed. We end the year with the Dash network having been approved and will go into effect before we convene again as a board, and we'll certainly be celebrating that. And I know staff is working on a plan to to have a ribbon cutting or first ride, if you will, in addition to a lot of other activities to celebrate this and raise awareness within the community of how to travel around on Dash, but also the fact that our buses are going to be free in the fall. So what a difference 9 months makes. I am cognizant of the fact that as we went through the fare free discussion, and we talked a lot about this, that, you know, it did seem that the city council very anxious to do this and really working through their budget process really didn't include us as a board in those deliberations. And, you know, we expressed to council, you know, our desire to be partners with them and our role in going forward and setting policy for the system. And that, you know, that is something that I will be following and remain very concerned about, how we as a board, you know, are ensured that our role is, and the independence of this board when it was set up is protected. And so, you know, that's something we'll be continuing to watch in the next year, but I do think we have a lot to celebrate. And I think the brighter days are ahead. And so whether you're traveling or staying nearby, I hope you are enjoying time with family and others you haven't seen in a long time. And that brings us to the eventual return to Dash. We'll be talking about in the general manager's report about continuing to reopen the facility and some of the benchmarks that are being reached. That also includes kind of bringing the board back in person. And there'll be discussion about that. I did want to share that as Josh and I talked and planned for this meeting tonight, that we discussed, you know, my belief that Dash, as soon as we are able to reconvene and get back into City Hall, that it's very important that we be having meetings in a facility that is very transit accessible. The Dash facility is, you know, certainly a wonderful host. I'm sitting here tonight and has a boardroom and is able to accommodate visitors quite well, but it is difficult to get to on Dash. And, you know, though there will still be virtual options for participation, and a lot of our public will participate virtually, it is important that folks who want to be in the room and want to participate with us, who take our system, have a very easy time in terms of accessibility and getting to the system. And I was pleased that Josh, you know, shares that with me, but I wanted to express to all of you, especially those of you who have never sat around a table with us for an in-person meeting, sort of the importance of being in a facility that is very transit accessible, but also recognizing that we may be ready here at Dash because of the investments that were made for Go Virtual prior to council, prior to the city having outfitted all of the various meeting rooms in City Hall to have the same AV capabilities. So we may start our meetings here in the fall, but we will get back to City Hall as soon as we are able to. So I just wanted to share that. I also wanted to congratulate my colleague Ajayesha Thomas on, I know probably had a very long day yesterday, her husband's successful winning of the primary election that he was in yesterday. I was an election officer at City Hall precinct, so I'm still recovering and catching up on my sleep, but I imagine you also had a very long day, but we send our congratulations to you and Kanik. That's all I have. Is Chris with us tonight?
Yes, I am.
Hi. I'll turn it over to you for your report.
Great, thank you very much. So there was a few things to report this month. Really great news. The NVTC Commission endorsed staff's recommendation for the commuter choice proposals, which includes almost $9.5 million for lines 35 and 36 over 2 years. So that's great news. The final step for that will be final approval at the CTB on June 23rd. We have Duke Street Transitway news, but I'll let Mr. Schnaufer talk about that right after this. WMATA update, the Finance Committee discussed potential fare and service changes for September. WMATA staff is kind of taking a lead from Alexandria and proposing a frequent bus network of 12-minute buses on high ridership routes, and then 20-minute network as well. So this would mean, for example, the 28A would see a 94% increase in service, which would be great. And then the 29K and N would see a 26% increase. There's also discussions about restoring routes and certain routes that have been modified. For example, and then this past Sunday, the WMATA modified or resumed service on a modified route, the 11C, which was the 11Y, but it stops at the Braddock Metro Station instead of going into downtown DC. And then the 21C, which is a modified 21A, 21Z. And then finally, and I didn't put this wasn't in the updates, but the King Street Metro bus loop is also, as of Sunday, is now, the first phase is now open. So we're very excited about that. So this means a relocation of all bus routes that serve the King Street Metro Rail station from the temporary bays to the new bus bays near the station entrance. There's also new digital real-time arrival screens and a real-time kiosk display, and then new crosswalks in the station lighting. Now, there's 3 more bus bays, and construction is still continuing on those, and the new Kiss and Ride area through the summer of 21. So among other things, once those bays are open, some of the buses will then be relocated to their permanent locations. So we're very excited about that. So, and thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Chris, can I ask you a question and then I'll open it up to the group? I came through, yeah, it's very exciting that the bus loop is open now. I know that has been a very long time coming. I actually, this evening came through there, but noticed one challenge now with the mid-block crosswalk coming out of the metro station by Theismann's and the hotel that is closed. The very large Capital Bike Share station that used to be very easy to get to from the metro is now a much farther walk because you have to go around, cross over a block away, and then kind of double back. And just wanted to know if, because I thought I had read that we're looking at another year of construction before that crosswalk is open. That's not going to be kind of a quick thing to finish the rest of the station. And so just wondering if there is any thought of trying to bring the bike share station a little closer to people who are getting off the buses or out of the metro station to be able to access those.
You know, that is a great question. I don't have information on that, but I can, I'll ask our bike share folks and I'll get you that information.
Okay, because it is, I rode bike share to King Street to then get on a dash to come here. And I noted that I probably would need to add about 5 to 6 minutes to parking the bike and then getting over into the bus bays because of the situation. So thank you. I appreciate you looking into that. But good news all around. And on the WMATA question, in terms of the more frequent bus service, also very good news. Where are they finding the funding for that? Are there going to be reductions on other less frequently used routes, or is this something that they're doing in response to some of the stimulus they're getting, and it's more of a temporary increase?
Yeah, as for now, yeah, it's all being funded with ARP and stimulus funding, ARP and stimulus funding right now, at least through the end of FY22. And then I'm sure next spring they're going to be reassessing, you know, if these frequencies make sense. Yeah, and if there will be more stimulus funding next for FY23 as well. So.
Okay. Other questions from the board for Chris? And Chris, the speaker from your staff about the Duke Street Transitway, is he prepared to go now?
I am.
Oh, okay, welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Schnapper. I work with Chris over in TESS Transportation Planning, and I am the Bus Rapid Transit Program Manager. I haven't had the chance to meet a lot of you. I've been on staff since January 2020. So I'm very excited to get the Duke Street in Motion project kicked off, which is, this is an informational item for the board, but we wanted to share that we're going to kick off this exciting project to re-examine the plans for bus rapid transit along Duke Street corridor. So if we could go to the next slide. Many of you are familiar with this project. It's been around, as you see from the graphic here, since 2008. So we're at year 13. I'm still working on implementing this. In 2008, Duke Street was identified as well as the Route 1 Transitway and West End Transitway as 3 transit corridors for the city. And obviously Metroway has been implemented on Route 1. We are also moving forward with design on the West End Transitway, but Duke Street hasn't really moved forward too much. In 2012, we updated that study and got into more detail with the transit corridor feasibility study. Had a very detailed layout and lane configuration plan for the Duke Street project. But it doesn't really quite fit 9 years later. It's a little dated, had different priorities with the city, and it's really hadn't had a lot of movement on implementing that plan. So when I started this project, the transportation planning team got together and we said, we need to take a go back to the drawing board on this and take a look at this. In the meantime, we were fortunate enough to receive funding to start planning and to replan and start the design and all the way through construction on the project. First in 2016, we were awarded $12 million of NBTA funding to start what they call environmental in their categories, but that also includes planning. And then more recently, last summer, we were awarded $75 million to continue the program, and that will likely get us in pretty deep into construction for the project. But what we're kicking off now is actually revisiting the planning process, and we're going to kick off a robust civic engagement process. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing with this kickoff. So phase one is the community visioning phase of the project. That's where we're at today. And the goal of this project is to go back out to the community and find out what the needs are and try to make it as inclusive as possible. We have a lot of folks that are very actively involved in communication, transportation, and communicating their thoughts to us. We also want to make sure we get in contact with underrepresented communities that don't necessarily participate on a regular basis. So we brought in a consultant, Roadside and Harwell Incorporated, and they are assisting us with our civic engagement process. So there'll be three main phases for this process. The first is identifying that vision for Duke Street, and that's where we're at today. Then we'll go back along with a design consultant to help, a planning and design consultant to help us with phase two, which is development of different alternatives, mostly physical improvements that we can do, but also service improvements, operation improvements, other things like that, and bring those back out to the community to see what they think, see if they like the ideas that are that we've come up with based on the vision that we heard through phase one. And then finally, once we come to a general consensus on those alternatives, we'll refine the plan and come up with a new conceptual plan to replace the one that was created in 2012. And then we'll move that through to get approval through the various boards and likely the city council as well. So we're using a lot of different strategies to demonstrate so this presentation for this group right here is letting you know what our process is of how we're going about the civic community visioning process. And we really want to, like I said earlier, emphasize those groups that aren't usually represented. Next slide, please. So how are we going to do that? The purpose of this is really to get the values, visions, and goals from the very beginning. We're not looking for people to say specific improvements that they want to see on a quarter. We want to get broader visions and values of what's important to them as they use different transportation modes, but the primary focus is bus through the corridor. So we want to build trust through awareness, really make sure everybody can, it's very transparent throughout the project. Everything's going to be based on our new webpage, which launches on Friday. We're gathering that input related to the goals. And again, we're not looking for specific solutions at this time. And we know the easiest, and we're going to hear it, we want to hear the concerns from the community as well. What frightens them about a potential project? And we've heard that already before we even kicked off this project. So we know a lot of the issues that are out there, but we want to make sure that all the community can voice their concerns and hopes and visions for this quarter. Next slide, please. So we're doing a hybrid approach because of COVID. We're doing both digital and in person. We're doing a lot of pop-up events. We're going out to bus stops. We'll be at parks. We're even going to a laundromat on the corridor to go out and survey people to see what it is and we'll have a survey online to that anybody can respond to help establish what those visions are. Try to draw those out of the public to give us an idea of what we need to do to move the project forward into the alternative development phase. We'll be talking to community leaders, of course. Again, several of them have already reached out to me, and we've had a good conversation already before we even kicked off the project. And part of our consultant team, what they bring to the table is people like Chris and myself, we jump into transportation jargon very easily and don't even know we're doing it. And these folks know how to make sure we don't do that. We do a good everyday person communication to find out what it is we're looking for out of the project. Everything will also be multilingual in Amharic, Spanish, and English. And then we want to explicitly tie the visions that we get out of this into the development of those alternatives in the second phase. So we're doing that by kicking off, like I said, the Duke Street Corridor Week. That's going to start on June 21st. And that's going to be where all those different pop-up events that I just mentioned are going to happen. We're working on finalizing the exact schedule of that. And that, again, will also be posted on our website, that will actually go live this Friday on our website. Next slide, please. So I've already kind of touched upon this. There's our website in the blue box there, alexandriava.gov, and then we actually have Duke in Motion. That's the brand we're using as we move this project forward, and you'll see that brand throughout the project. You'll see some signs throughout the park when you go out to the parks, at the bus stops, and that website will be active for the next 12 to 18 months that we'll be working through the different initial phases of this project. I think it's still one more slide. Yes, so once we get through this initial phase, what's going to happen next, starting this fall, probably about August, we may delay till September just because of vacations, things like that. We're going to go out and to have smaller focus groups. Hopefully we can meet some in person, maybe out in the parks. These are going to be different groups. The bus rider advocacy group that's being formed. Whitney and I just talked about this today. I'm going to be talking to them. Bike advocacy groups, the civic associations, churches, all sorts of different stakeholder groups along the corridor. The consultant team is going to meet with them individually to continue that process that we're starting with the kickoff week events. We're going to have a stakeholder group established as we move further along in the project to help guide us through the alternative development, but that we're still going back out to the community to get their input once we get those the concept plans established. We're going to then revise the plans, obviously, and then the final plans and analysis for approval. And those final plans will have preliminary environmental analysis too, which includes things like transportation or ridership projections, impacts to traffic based on whatever physical improvements we make out there, and impacts to natural environment items along the corridor, those type of things. So right now we're planning on a 12 to 18 month schedule. It is a little bit flexible depending on how robust of a conversation we have coming up through the summer and fall. We might have to extend that towards the latter part of the 18-month window. But we're remaining flexible. We do want to hear from the public. One of the things I have kept emphasizing through my initial conversations with some of the groups out there is that we are really starting with a blank slate. The scope of the project is the things that are not on the table are it's going to be transit related. It's going to focus on transit. It's going to go from the Landmark Mall, site to the King Street Metro Station. It's going to stay on Duke Street. It's not going to deviate from Duke Street, and that's about it. Everything else is on the table. Things like, are we going to have dedicated lanes or not? What type of bike facilities, if any, are going to be incorporated into the project? Are we going to keep the parking lanes on the portions of the corridor? Maybe some of these things might apply for a portion of the corridor. Some of them might apply for all. We don't know at this point. It really is a blank slate moving into this, kicking off this project next week. So I believe that's my last slide. Yes, there's my personal information. Please feel free to email me, but I'm here for discussion and questions right now, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mark. Well, I'll kick off and then we'll open up to the group. So, our board, in addition to kind of being setting the policy for DASH, we as a group understand those board members, we have an advocacy role to play as well for transit. And so, we're very interested, obviously, in this project because Duke Street is such a critical transit corridor, but in terms of any advocacy we might do and sort of being able to be part of the process, where do you see us fitting in?
I definitely wish you would encourage people to participate early on, help spread the word that this project is even going on. A lot of people know about it. A lot of people know the history of it, but again, those are the folks we know that already know about the project. They've reached out to me already when they heard that I was coming on board with the city. So anytime you have a ability to help spread the word to those folks that don't necessarily participate, if you talk to fellow bus riders, if you're just people, just when you're, if you're talking about business or your boards, really help spread the word about the project right at the beginning. We're not trying to push an agenda on anybody, so I don't encourage this group to advocate for any specific policy. We really want to hear what the community thinks about this one. I do plan on updating this board regularly throughout the process. So I will be coming back to you. I want your input on the alternatives that we do come up with and what you think about especially the physical improvements and the operational improvements for the system, your technical expertise on and knowledge of how Dash operates will be very important for this as well. One of the things that's even still on the table is who's going to operate the system. Like the Metroway is run by WMATA, but this is going to be completely within Alexandria, so it's quite possible that this would end up being operated by Dash. Those are all things that we would love your input on.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that, you know, just kind of, I guess, reiterating the importance of transit and the importance of Dash bus service on Duke Street would be very helpful.
And I certainly think tying back to Chris, what you said about the WMATA improvements that are going, because our Duke Street improvements aren't funded until 23 and 24, that certainly encouraging more ridership on the corridor is going to also help to build support for this project. So that's kind of exciting that that's happening at the same time that we're finding out what people really want on the street. A lot of potential. Anyone else have questions or comments?
Question. When you do your community outreach, what are your provisions for people with disabilities?
Well, for starters, the consultant we hired is a specialist in this. We've really mostly focused on, that's actually a really good question. Now, I don't know if we have adequately addressed it. We've been focusing more on the multilingual responses. And quite frankly, I don't have a good answer for you on that. I do know where we're doing the pop-up locations as far as are all going to be ADA compliant locations. So beyond that, we really haven't addressed that. We will try our best to make whatever provisions we need if they come up. I do know we're going through our city website, which I believe meets different ADA compliant provisions, but that's actually a really good question that I will need to share with my consultant team and rely on their expertise on some of the unknowns that might pop up. But we are making sure, at least for our pop-up events, that all of the locations are fully ADA compliant. Thanks for the question. That's going to be, that's a really good point that, quite frankly, I missed.
So hi, Mark. This is Jaysha. I have a question about outreach as well. I may have missed it, but is it just going to be like a survey or something that people can fill out online, like in addition to in-person pop-up, giving their feedback to different people working those events? Are people able to just email? Are they able to call in? Like some people may not be able to write or read or, you know, submit things that way. They may just be verbally communicating with folks.
Yes.
Can they call a number to call in or something to give their feedback?
So again, as far as a number to call in, things like that, we don't have that at our pop-up events. Those are going to be live and manned, and we're going to actually have the surveys filled out in person. So anybody that doesn't have the ability to read or even use a computer or anything like that, the project team will be able to help them to fill out the survey. It is a survey. There's also a webinar that we will be doing. I've neglected to mention that, and that'll be on Wednesday of the kickoff week. That's the 24th, I believe, of June. So that webinar will be available live, and it'll be the same format as this pretty much, where the public can ask questions, but also it'll be recorded and posted on the project website as well. And it's mostly the introductory website, introductory presentation, and that will lead people to that initial survey.
And will you have language interpretation? Because
Yes.
Zoom does have that feature, and will you advertise that? Because I notice a lot of time the city hosts events, they don't advertise that language interpretation is available. So that may like reduce the number of people who actually want to participate in a meeting when they don't know that it's available to them.
Yes,
So I would
believe
also like plug that as making sure that people are aware of that when you're advertising that event.
yes, we are accommodating that in one way. I can't remember if we were going to have Spanish and Amharic closed captioning available, or if we were actually going to have an actual translator. I think it was the closed captioning one that we're doing, but I will definitely follow up with my project team on that as well.
Closed captioning would just, you'd run into the same issue of people who may not be able to read Spanish or a mark or something.
Right.
So I would encourage live interpretation as an option that you go with.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, if not, Mark, thank you. We encourage you to be a frequent visitor here. It's very exciting that the outreach is getting underway. And I think, you know, what you highlighted about rebuilding trust and bringing a fresh set of eyes and perspective to this is really, really important. And so we look forward to being involved in monitoring this project as it moves along.
I do as well, and I look forward to giving you an update on what we heard at when we resume in the fall.
Thank you.
Have a good summer, everyone.
So we'll open the floor now to our colleagues on the board who serve in multiple capacities, boards, commissions, and associations. If there's anything you want to share for the betterment of the group, I'll open the floor. Oh, seeing some heads.
Chairman,
Steve, yeah.
I serve on the ad hoc scooter task force as the chairman, and we had our second meeting in May to address issues relative to the use of the scooter policy that the city is developing. The key issues that the TE&S staff brought up to us to discuss at our next meeting would be riding and safety issues, the placement of scooters throughout the city, managing complaints, and probably the most important topic to the group based on the level of conversation, both parking and the use of sidewalks for these mobility devices. And that'll be addressed in greater length at the next meeting that we're going to have in July. There is an outreach meeting scheduled for June 26th, where the TE&S team will be gathering feedback from the user population throughout the city. But the process is ongoing, and I'll keep the group informed of progress. I don't see this as significantly impacting ridership, just based on the distribution and use on current patterns, but it does have some impact with regard to suggestions as to parking locations. And one of the members of the task force suggested that rather than use parking spaces that are currently used for vehicles, that perhaps the use of partial use of bus stops be used, but I was able to share our input on that. But I'll keep the group informed of our progress.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the general manager's report. Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good to see you. My report this evening will include several contributors who are on the Zoom with us. I'll start out, and as we go, as with any other reports that I typically give you, whether it is me or another presenter providing information, please feel free to interject for any discussion related to those items. I'll start out with my typical COVID-19 service update, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently this month because we are very much starting to feel the effects of the vaccine, the pandemic, although still ongoing, and in many parts of the world, even worse than it is in the United States. We're seeing great improvement, and obviously many states and localities have continued to open up and release restrictions. So we figured that it is an important time to fill you in on exactly where DASH stands in our reopening plans, how we're going to move forward, what metrics we have established internally, And of course, to answer any questions or concerns you might have pertaining to potential to get back together in September in person. I'm going to turn over this report to our Director of Safety, Stephanie Salzone, who's joining us on the Zoom to talk about what we've got going on. She has really led for over a year now. She has been the leader of our organization's COVID response. And I just want to point out, because I may forget to do this at the end of this presentation, but you'll see on your report on page 7, something that I thought was worthy of recognizing Stephanie and her team, as well as the entire DASH team, for their work, which is that throughout the entirety of this event, since it started, as we understood it, DASH has had 29 total positive cases within the workforce. 28 of those are actual employees, one of them a contractor. And that comes down to about 11.4% positivity rate. And I just got to say that I think everything that we've done as a team has been really effective, and the communications we've been doing have been essential in making sure that our team is supported, understands the restrictions, understands how to keep themselves safe, and ultimately, to the very best of our ability, ensure that they are not exposed to the virus at the workplace. So I will turn it over to Stephanie to run through some of what we're doing here, and then I'll come back to answer any of your questions. So go ahead, Stephanie.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Baker, for that introduction and kind sentiment. I do appreciate that. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. It may go without saying, but I'm actually very excited to talk with you all about this today, because I'm feeling like we're finally coming out the other side of what's been over a year of incredible work that this team has been doing. It's nice to kind of round third base at this point and come to what seems to be the finale of all of this. And so we have established with that, in order to kind of close this out, 2 goals for us going forward as we look at reopening our facility, getting back to the standard of what it was before the pandemic began. And the first one is asking that 50% of our employees become vaccinated in order for us to reopen amenities such as the gym and the quiet room and lounge games. And I'll take a moment just to reemphasize, that this is not to, once they do open, limit anyone who's not vaccinated. We just purely want to get to 50% vaccination to open those areas for safety. And then the second goal that we set very recently was asking that 60% of our employees become vaccinated in order to remove the mask mandate for those that are vaccinated. As you may know, the city of Alexandria recently, as well as the state of Virginia, released that mandate for mask requirements for those that are vaccinated, but they did leave it up to the discretion of businesses and employers to move forward as they felt it was safe to do so. So we've established a goal of 60% to do that. The remainder of this list here are mitigation techniques that we have previously been doing that we've now cut back or eliminated altogether. One being that social distancing requirements have been rescinded, if you will, within the facility, as well as our capacity requirements that we had. Those have now returned to normal. That's going to be critical as we move forward and continuing our large training classes for the new DASH network coming this fall. So we're very excited about that piece. We are resuming again with visitors. That's been limited for over a year now. So we are allowing visitors to resume to the facilities as needed and to come visit staff when they're able to do so. We have also resumed, this may be the most exciting piece, is some in-person meetings. And I'll say that the senior management team met yesterday for the first time. And although it was a little awkward, it was a lot of fun to get back together again. So we're excited to finally get to that place where we could be in the same room together. It's been over a year, so we're really excited about that piece. And finally, we still are, allowing workers to work remotely if they're able to. Our meetings that are resuming in person, we still have a virtual option. So for those that are not ready or can't return yet. So it's a bit of a hybrid, but it's nice to come back in person together. And then on the final slide here, I do want to emphasize that the federal requirements from TSA at the federal level are still in place for wearing masks on a bus or public transportation and at the hub. So when I talk about a mask mandate within the facility, that's separate from the TSA order. That TSA order is still in effect through September as it stands right now. You'll see here that 38% of our workforce is vaccinated, and I will say I'm happy about that number from the standpoint that only a few weeks ago we were only at 20%. So we've basically doubled at this point. I think this morning we were at 39%. And when you look at the city of Alexandria holding at about 49%, we're not terribly far off. So I think we're in a good spot as of right now. We did do a raffle that we initiated last week, that those that submitted by June 4th would have their name entered in for a $50 gift card. We did have 3 winners. I know Whitney's team is going to be reaching out to them this week to provide them with their $50 gift card for those that entered. And then we're continuing, my department, not alone, of course, all the other directors are joining as well, but my department especially, still offering help for those that are not sure, still want to know more, may not be ready, not sure how to get a vaccine. So we're still offering them that support as they may need it. And then Josh already spoke to, the 28 cases that we have. And I would just close by saying that I agree with him. It's something to be extremely proud of. All the conversations I've had with our peer agencies, I think we did really well. And that's a testament to our frontline workers and the senior management team under Mr. Baker's leadership. I think we did an excellent job. So at this time, that's all I have as far as our COVID update. I hope that was good news for you to hear. I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have for me.
Mr. Chair, Stephanie, how do you compel the employees to say they're vaccinated? In other words, are there folks who are not telling you, or that, are not induced by the $50 gift card? And then what do you do about that?
Sure. So we don't require the cards to be submitted as purely voluntary, but we have had to get a little creative. I did do an internal commercial recently with the help of Whitney's team. I was dubbed a little bit of the Army recruiter, trying to get people to help, come turn in your cards. And I will say we had a lot of cards submitted that people were vaccinated back in January and February, and just wasn't sure that their card really was of any value as far as turning it over. So we thought that commercial worked out pretty well. We did see a huge uptick. So I hope that answers your question. We are having to get a little bit creative, but just providing a reason as to why it's important, I think, was helpful.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, 38%, it's got to come up. I don't understand the resistance. And I'm facing the same issue in my workplace as well, but thank you. That's good to hear.
And just to put some context around it, 38%, that is over 100 employees. So I just want to, emphasize that we are at over 100 people now that have submitted their card. And I do suspect there are more, but we'll be as creative as possible as we move through the summer.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate you joining us this evening to update the board. I was looking at the screen. I don't see any other questions, but again, please share our thanks with the team. If any members, Matt, you as well, if anybody hears of any creative ways that are working, we're all open to it. We remain focused on the rights of the employees and allowing them to choose appropriately, but we want to do everything we can within our ability to encourage and persuade as much as possible, because the evidence has shown the vaccine is safe, effective, and hopefully we'll continue to see people step forward now that it's very easy and proven. So, all right. So moving on to my next report. This is item 4B. It starts on page 8 of your packet. I would ask you to refer to the packet, which is also posted on our website in the meeting materials for anybody who is watching this meeting from the public. This is a time when I wanted to just run through the draft of our fair, free framework that we discussed at the last meeting. Again, no action is required by the board at this meeting. Instead, I'm just looking for reactions. You don't even have to give all of your details today. If you have a chance to look at this and you have some feedback you'd like us to incorporate, please go ahead and email me. Please carbon copy Beth. Beth does a wonderful job at helping to keep the information together for us. So, but we would love to hear from you I'll just run briefly through the sections of this framework and remind the board that the concept here is to establish a document that can be a working document as needed, but ultimately is a document that guides the decision process for the board in the future and is shared with the city in order to make sure we're all pretty much on the same page about what are the conditions required to continue this program, what are the impacts, what are the decisions we should be looking at making if and when funding falls short of the ability to fund the program, and how staff need to engage our riders on feedback and provide outreach, and last but not least, how to ensure that we have equipment plans. I'm sorry, I didn't go in order of these bullets, but that we have equipment plans specific to these fare boxes. Again, just for those who are viewing the meeting, the first section here talks a lot about the fundamental goals of the program and our efforts to reduce barriers to riding, increase usage, reduce costs associated with collection of fares, to promote awareness and encourage usage of the new Dash network, and to increase operational efficiencies and service reliability, reducing dwell time at bus stops. The second section here talks about program funding, and on a high level, this is talking about the amount of money that the city has subsidized Dash to enact this program, which this year is $1.47 million. The additional funding that is required beyond that to adjust for foregone fare revenue that was originally projected in our new grants that we heard earlier have been funded and locked in for lines 35 and 36 on the 395 commuter choice program. The scoring criteria and how we approach the TRIP program that is coming out from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. The initial guidance has been released for comment, and we're working on that right now before the program opens for applications. And then probably most importantly in this section, we outline on page 9 of the board packet a table that represents the foregone fare revenue that's associated. And I think that the board and I and many of the staff here at Dash have all shared the same concern, which is the price tag jumps from 1.47 to over 4 million, in the upcoming years. And then by FY25 hits 5 million, 5.5 million. So this is not a simple, easy lift, and it's going to require true dedication and commitment from our funding sources to continue. So that is outlined there and helps us to kind of understand. Those numbers will move around over time and certainly can be adjusted, but it gives you a sense of what we're expecting. Section 3, the program conditions, again, high level. This helps to identify key conditions that should be taken under consideration as the program progresses. And it starts out talking about how this needs to be continued as long as sufficient funding is available, avoiding service reductions and avoiding adverse reductions in force. So this is fundamentally saying that our recommendation on the staff draft is that the board take the position that fare or reductions in service, whether you want to say minor or significant or all, is problematic and should be avoided in the efforts to maintain this program. And certainly we should not be laying off staff and reducing the force in order to ensure we can continue free fares. This talks about a public outreach process to solicit public opinion in the event that such a situation is encountered. It also talks about the support of the Dash Board of Directors regarding the implementation and continuation of the 2022 and 2030 Alexandria Transit Vision Plan, and the importance that we have all seen and taken in regards to seeing that program and that plan come to fruition in full by 2030. And then it talks about the that we would continue to maintain fare collection equipment in a ready-to-go status for at least a year, that we would proceed with the permanent decommissioning of such fare equipment after the first year and only when the following conditions are met. One being that City Council and the Board of Directors agree that fares would not be collected on dash buses for a period of at least 3 years. And we're asking for this commitment in order to ensure that we don't fall behind and then end up in a place where we can't establish fare collection again. There's a note here, I don't know, it doesn't say it in this section, but there's a significant cost investment associated with the new fare boxes that are coming out. Certainly that can also be in a way a justification for continuing fare free. The other item, number 2 of these conditions would be that we complete and are funded and complete an installation and validation of our APCs, automatic passenger counters. Again, for anyone who's listening who isn't familiar with this, an APC automatically counts passengers boarding and alighting through either door of the bus. In the initial year of this program, we're simply going to have to use the fare boxes to manually count how many people board. And until we get to a point where the automatic passenger counters work, which is equipment that you would often see in places like the metro trains, we would need that in place to continue this program. If we do reinstate fares, there is a statement here that we would ask that a minimum of 2 years of prior notice. This is conceivably after we've decommissioned our equipment, to allow us to then procure and install and establish the equipment necessary to accept payment. And this is really because the region is moving to a next generation fare box. The equipment that's being used dates back to the late 90s, early 2000s. And so there's going to be a significant capital investment in order to do that. And then the price tag of that estimated in today, and I would make the caveat in the event that someone looks at this 4 years down the road and looks at this meeting in the minutes and says, what was Josh saying? I'm going to make it very clear. This is what we know today. We're expecting somewhere around $4 million to implement the next generation fare boxes. So, you know, it certainly shows how costly fare collection equipment can be. The next section is program equipment. Simply provides a timeline for the disinvestment of fare collection equipment and the decommissioning of it, between removing it from the buses, installing automatic passenger counters, and then again, once again, reiterating the importance of a 2-year notice to reinstate fare collection. The last 2 sections deal with program outreach and the expectations that the DASH team conduct regular customer surveys, make outreach efforts through normal outreach channels, digital and traditional. And there's a list here of different ways that could be done. And then any significant changes to this program, the same thing would need to happen, where there would be public outreach and allow for this board to hear from the public as a result of that outreach, the priorities that they might see. It is possible that the public could say that their priorities are different from this framework. And certainly it's important to capture the fact that we would want to know that. And finally, the program analysis is an expectation that we would look at and analyze and review the effectiveness of the program, provide that information back to the board, help the board to understand what are the effects of this program to the greatest degree that we can, and contemplate any improvements that should be made in order to further extend the effectiveness of the program, with an annual summary report provided to the directors each fall in association with the anniversary of the implementation of this program, which will be in September of 2021. So again, anyone who would like to review that, the information is on our website. You may also reach out to us on our email, and we'll be happy to provide that document to you. But now I will stop and allow for any board members to weigh in on any reactions or feedback you have now. And again, I would just remind you, don't feel pressured to provide that all right now. You certainly can put it together in an email. If you're anything like me, you probably might want to sit down and compose some specifics, and we're happy to bring all that back, incorporate it back in for the fall. So.
Josh, I'll go ahead and just make a couple observations. Well, first, thank you. I know your staff worked very hard on putting this document together and getting this framework going. You and I had talked at the outset about the importance of having this in place and not just simply going in and saying, well, we're going to stop charging fares. There's actually a lot that has to go behind this and a lot that we needed to document, not only internally, but also for council and other stakeholders so they understand kind of what's involved in this and, you know, some of the costs as well as some of the savings, and, you know, that it's not simply just flipping a switch. It's a lot more involved in that. So thank you for getting us this draft so quickly. I guess, you know, in looking at the 3-year agreement, understanding the what's involved in how long we retain our fare boxes and then what's involved in getting them back, and understanding that it may not even be the same fare box we're getting now because as WMATA makes technology changes, but that's complicated because the city does 1-year budgeting. And often changes that would result to this program would probably occur, say, something like a pandemic where there's not an anticipation of a kind of a gradual slowdown. Oh, the city's going to have to tighten their belts, but oh my, we are, you know, experiencing some, you know, fill in the blank, and now we have to adjust to that. And so with a 3-year lead time, we can't then guarantee, you know, we can't say, okay, well, now we, you know, our subsidies being cut, or this program that was helping fund this has gone away. So how are we going to make up that money now? Well, we said we're going to start charging fares again if service goes away, not with the 3-year lead time. So can you talk a little more about that, and sort of also the kind of getting a quote unquote agreement from council on the 3-year rule, given that their membership will change with elections and that a future council wouldn't necessarily be bound by that?
Certainly. Well, I will say that one of the things I understand about the TRIP program is that there is an expectation that any such program applied for within it would have a 3-year phased approach to phase from the TRIP funding to locally funded support of the program. You know, these numbers that we're seeing are raw numbers. It's very conceivable that we could get all or a large portion of that deficit covered by such a program. But I think that the other piece of this is, you know, you're right. We don't have the ability to, you know, really predict the future, and we don't have the ability to hold council accountable to that. I think that this is sort of stipulating what we would need, and certainly the effects that these changes have on us, because remobilizing is just so difficult. My hope would be that then we would be able to utilize that as a part of our discussion with council and through the budget process to say, you know, this is why this needs to be funded, and certainly that asking us to cut service or reduce staff or anything like that in order to balance and preserve this program are problematic. So it's hard for me on this forum to know whether there are staff members who are on the Zoom who want to weigh in, but I would just ask them, whether it's Martin, Evan, or others who are familiar with this, come off mute and jump in. But I think that's conceivably the key pieces for me. And we can certainly talk more about that, and we can try to vet that out and how we navigate that. But I see Evan's popped up, so maybe he's got a perspective he wants to share on answering that.
Good evening, Evan Davis, Director of Finance. Just one point as far as the TRIP materials that we've reviewed so far that have been put out by the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. It appears that they're asking for a 4-year commitment from localities for a 0 fare pilot. The first 3 years would have state funding in declining amounts each year, with the 4th year expected to be entirely funded by the locality. So should that be the case in the final application guidance, once they finalize it in about a month or so, you know, that would be something that we would need to understand, the board would need to understand, and city council would need to understand if the city is going to make an application under that project. So And that could, obviously, those decisions, are up to council and to you as the board, but there could be an external, restriction there that could impact, that would need to be taken into account.
That's also interesting on the TRIP program because, and thank you for sharing that information, because, our cost becomes more expensive in the out years, but we're going to get the most support in year one. So, I don't know then if that's, and maybe that there's clarification needed on that in terms of, is it then a percentage of the total costs, or is it sort of, you start with year one, we're going to fund, 90% of what your, year one costs are, but then year two, it's going up because we're recovering from a pandemic and they're then only funding 70%. Is it going to be of the year one, or is it going to be taking into consideration those escalating costs? Maybe we don't know yet, but I think that's kind of an important detail of the program.
Yeah, it's set up as a percentage of cost. So presumably if your cost increases in the next year, even if it's a lower percentage, the amount of state support could be higher. Okay. But I think the intention is to help localities ease into it financially, obviously, and with the goal that expectation that the state can't fund it forever. If it's a matter of policy at the local level, the locality has to fund it.
Okay. And then I guess I would ask, is there thought of keeping, because we've left it a little open-ended in terms of when we will dispose of these fare boxes. And I didn't know, because it's not stated when WMATA plans to implement their next generation fare boxes, but is there storage cost, or what would be the disadvantage of continuing to hold on to those fare boxes longer than 1 year after the APCs are operational? Or will they just be obsolete by that point because of WMATA's schedule?
I don't know the schedule for WMATA's program. Evan or Martin, do you? I'm not very familiar with that next generation fare box project.
Yeah, so the contract was finalized earlier this year. The WMATA and the region are actively engaged in testing and final configuration efforts with the contractor, which is Cubic and Genfair. So the WMATA and some regional agencies are going to be purchasing those fare boxes this summer, placing orders actually, and costs increase after a deadline that's in August. It's not so much, I can't give you a 100% clear answer on whether the old fare boxes will no longer be functional. I think the key point there is when WMATA may go to an account-based back-end system, which is in their roadmap, but is not, the details of that are nowhere close to being finalized. The issue is partially that the existing fare box is dependent on a piece of technology which for well over a decade has no longer been manufactured. And there is a stopgap solution called the DCU, and we have a limited quantity of those which we can use to plug holes. But it doesn't make sense for us to continue to invest in a stopgap solution when WMATA is changing fundamentally the entire fare box. And it just so happens that fare box is more than double the price of existing fare boxes. So strategically, it likely makes more sense to simply invest in the next generation equipment should we need to continue to have fare boxes. But as far as a hard deadline when the existing fare boxes no longer work, I don't have that information. I'm not sure if any of the other folks on staff do.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you. That gets at my question. So we'll open this up to the rest of the group.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like Ms. Collins has her hand up.
Hi, thank you. I have 2 comments and a question. I actually thought that the 3-year time period for kind of a noticing of when, kind of a notice of when the fares would be reinstated was actually interesting because council terms are 3 years and we're about to see the new council. So it seems like the cycle would be starting with this council to at least give kind of a verbal commitment to the program for during their term, and then we can revisit that, of course, every year during budget time. But it gives them a clear understanding that this is a commitment that they have to make financially over the term of their service. So I thought that was actually quite interesting how the timing could potentially be a benefit to the fare-free program. My second comment is the community engagement piece I thought was really great. If there's ever a need to reinstate fares, I think it is very important that we engage the community and have them weigh in. They may be able to provide some support that would be helpful for council to find necessary funds to keep the program. So I think engaging the community is a key component if we are looking to go back to charging fares. I think that's great. And then my question was, in the report and also in the update that Josh provided, you say that the fare equipment would remain ready to go. Does that mean that the fare boxes will stay there on the buses, but just be covered, or would they be taken off and then put somewhere and kind of ready to be reinstalled if we need them again?
So that's a very good question. The removal of the fare boxes is dependent upon the APCs being installed in the fleet and certified so that we can continue to ensure passenger counting meets requirements. But the way I envisioned it is that we would remove the fare boxes, but keep them on premise, here stored in the facility. And then in the event that they need to be put back on the buses, we could reinstall them. I don't know that we went into the detail of figuring out exactly how long we would store them, here at the building and off the buses, but I think that's something we can continue to work to fine tune. But I think that the point at which they're surplused or scrapped or whatever happens, that's a significant milestone for us because it means they're gone, right? And so having them gone is a huge step. And I think that we would be very cautious and slow about doing that, keeping the equipment, even if it comes off the bus here, for as long as we could or need to. Hopefully that helps a little bit in answering your question. I would say the other thing that's important to be mindful of here is that the longer this program goes on, especially if Dash and the city, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we're exploring how to move forward in applying for federal discretionary funds to fund our bus electrification, fleet electrification program and our capital programs. The implication of that funding is that there are significant Title VI equity analysis requirements associated with programmatic changes to routes and fare structures and services that previously Dash has been exempt from having to do. So, having no fares for an extended period of time is very, very hard to, the impact, the disparaging impact on minority and disadvantaged populations in particular can be significant enough that it would trigger real problems on the federal level as far as maintaining compliance. So, they're all things, that we're aware of, that we're accounting for, we're trying to make sure we think about here in this framework, but they all point to the reality that we're in, that is, this program is not something that you can flip the switch on and off at will. You can't one year say we're fare free and the next year say we're fares and then the next year say we're fare. It just doesn't work that way. So we're trying to account for that in this framework. So I was just looking around to see if there were, Mr. Greaves put his hand up.
Quick question. In September, schools reopen, businesses begin to have in-person attendance again. This program starts. And I'm wondering if there's any anticipation of, not crowded buses. Are we doing that well that we could anticipate crowded buses and may have to revisit routes? Plus, we are also changing the routes. So the busier locations, do you think it's necessary to just have some sort of backup plan? And I'm thinking positively that the ridership would increase significantly.
For sure. And that would be, typically a good problem to have, so long as it doesn't exceed the capacities of what we have in place. I might defer that, if you don't mind, to when we get to Martin's planning report, because he and his team have done a lot of work helping to separately answer the question about lessons learned. And I think that was one of the things that has come up in the lessons learned, and something that we should account for. But it's a very good point, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And it's hard to decipher exactly how you mitigate that, but it is our hope that the frequency and continued investment that we have made in a fleet that has built-in extra capacity is important. You know, historically, I've always had to fight in my career with this mantra of the idea that buses are too big if they look empty all the time, and many people don't understand that you have to have the equipment able to handle the maximum load, even if that maximum load only happens once a day. You have to have that. You know, you can't switch buses around, and as you point out, we can't quickly respond to capacity constraint issues. So the best of our ability to have maximum capacity available is going to be important moving forward. So go ahead, Mr. Chairman, if there was anything else you wanted to add. I was just going to echo that again. I just want to emphasize that I welcome, email comments, talking points, things that you would find helpful to include, and that will really help us to fine tune this and bring it back to you all in the fall as a polished document that hopefully we could then start to move forward on adopting. And then I think ultimately it would be my goal to bring it in front of council, to talk to them about it and talk to them about why we're doing it and what we have put forth.
Well, that was just going to be my, just to get clarity on the process here. So this is going to come back to us in September with the goal that we would take a formal vote to endorse at that time if we have gotten to a point that we are comfortable with the document. And then whether council would have to vote on this as a policy, or that it is just sort of an understanding of that they acknowledge this document and the parameters that are set forth. Have we had conversation? And now very helpful to understand that the fare free requirement may also come with the TRIPS application, which then I think does help to kind of bind council to this. But sort of, have we had discussions with the manager about how we will get their concurrence to this policy, or simply awareness?
We have, I largely envisioned this as a dash, as a dash framework. My suggestion would be, when we ultimately talk with the manager and others about this, would be for council to consider some sort of a commitment outside of this. Based on the structure and how we're set up, because council doesn't set policy for dash, I don't think the two could be blended in any way, but I do think there's a lot of value and importance in this being a policy document that dashboard has taken, and then the council can choose, of course, to reject it or overrule it. But I wouldn't anticipate that. I would instead anticipate that there would be potentially some effort from a budgetary directive perspective, as council sets budget priorities and requirements to the city, that they would factor this in somehow. That's where I would see, again, much in the same way that I have the relationship that I do with you as the board, the manager has that with the council, and so it would be dependent upon him and the council as to determine exactly how that played out. But that would certainly be something that I would engage in a discussion about.
All right, well, we'll see this again in the fall. Thank you.
All right, the last item I'm going to talk to you about before I hand it over to Raymond and our consulting team is just to let the board know, some of you were not members of the board at the time we originally took this up. Back in February 2018, I came to the board with a proposal to join in a pledge with the United States Department of Transportation to fight human trafficking, which is very much modern day slavery and is a horrific problem. And the impact of this is really in many ways, I think, just starting to be seen. It's an issue that has taken a lot of work, raising public awareness, committing the educational efforts, and measuring collective impact of programs throughout our communities. The board unanimously endorsed taking this pledge, which I signed and submitted to the Department of Transportation. Part of that pledge was that we would take part in and participate in opportunities to collect information about public awareness, to collect information about the issue, and of course, most importantly, to be a resource and a place for individuals who are witness to or victims of human trafficking, and as a resource to them. So as a result of that, I'm proud to announce this month that we have partnered with United Against Slavery, an organization that has received many awards and recognition for their efforts in measuring and speaking out against and finding the information and the effects of programs to target and reduce human trafficking. And so there is a press release that's going out and as we speak, and we will be actively participating in their next round of surveys, distributing that within our workforce and our ridership. That's going to be coming up very soon. But you know, this is just something I'm very passionate about. This, among other things, human rights, issues surrounding equality, disparaging treatment of fellow humans is such an issue, and I'm just proud that we're an organization that has taken this pledge previously, that we're also an organization that's able to partner with United Against Slavery, that we continue to look at opportunities and ways internally and externally to combat this issue, as well as many others that members of our community may face. So just proud to announce that, and would ask you to keep your eyes out for the public information that's going to come out for that, as well as the surveys and the other information that's going to be collected in partnership with UAS. All right. I'm going to turn the presentation now over to Raymond Wee, who is our Assistant General Manager and has largely taken the lead on our capital projects. Ray has been doing an outstanding job moving forward on our electrification efforts, and he also handles and helps us with our facility expansion projects and whatnot. So I'm going to allow him to introduce our consulting team that is here to talk about the BUS implementation study final report. So Ray, I will continue to drive the slides as you do the intro.
Thank you, Josh. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Tonight we'll be providing a presentation of the latest completion of our zero emissions bus efforts. And this effort dates back several years. Many members of this board may not have been on this board when our voyage down electrification and zero emissions fleet conversion has begun. So just a bit of background, about 3 years ago, this organization has set the goal of going 100% zero emissions, no conventional vehicles purchased by the year 2027, which would allow us to have a fully zero emissions fleet by the year 2035, about 2037. About 2 years ago, we completed a initial zero emissions bus feasibility study that helped us validate and understand what goals, if this goal is obtainable and by what rate, and with which technologies. And subsequent to that, we were tasked, the next step for us is to complete a implementation study, which would help us figure out how do we get from where we are today, as far as what we have in rolling stock, technology, and facilities, Starting from there, and how do we get to our eventual goal of converting our fleet to 100% zero emissions by the year 2035. Due to fiscal constraints at the time, we had actually split up the implementation study into 2 phases, if you recall. Phase 1 being the more urgent tasks, the things and items and concepts that we needed to know and figure out as it relates to the forthcoming DASH facility expansion that's coming over the horizon, as well as phase 2, which will be more of the supporting infrastructure, maintenance assessment, and total cost of ownership tasks, which will be subsequent to phase 1. So tonight, you will be hearing and seeing a presentation by our consulting team, which is WSP. I'm also joined by a few members of our project management team, including Eben and Martin from our own staff, Bill Egger from the city. And I would like to introduce Josh. Next slide, please. One more, please. And one more. I'd like to hand it over to our WSP consultant project team, Sev Skorud, who's our project manager, as well as Mark Probst, who's our deputy PM, who's very familiar with our facility and has taken a large role in this this particular project. So Sev or Mark, you can take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Raymond, and thank you, members of the board. We're very excited to be here and also very excited to be a part of this project. We think DASH is leading the way in Northern Virginia for zero emission fleet transition, and we're excited to see the progress of this project and continue working with DASH hopefully in the near future. So my name is Severin Skolrud. I'm the zero emission project manager for the Capital District. I support fleet transitions in Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia. Mark?
Thanks, Sev. I'm Mark Probst. I've been doing maintenance and operations facilities for all of my 40-plus year career and had the fortunate opportunity to work with DASH and your staff over 10 years ago in developing your current facility. So it's been quite gratifying to be able to pick up kind of where we left off and help you with the introduction of zero emission buses and make sure that it's something that's scalable as you move forward. Mike?
And I'm Mike Martin, also in Mark Probst's group here at WSP. Been taking part in this project, helping out, figure out all the zero emissions transition, particularly on the battery electric bus side, and working on this project as well as quite a few others in the region. There's quite a bit nearby with Maryland MDOT-MTA. We're actually looking at a transition plan there as well. So very, very excited to get to be a part of this one and excited to kind of see the whole industry transitioning and making lots of forward progress. And I'll hand it over to you, Phil. Nope, still muted, Phil.
Can you hear me?
Now you're good.
Okay. Phil, my name is Phil Jonat, and I'm our power and utility specialist on the team. I've been working for 13 years in power and energy projects, and looking forward to working with your team and Dominion to take this project forward. But now, Sev, you want to present? Next slide.
All right, so this is an overview of the zero emission bus project phasing. First, we focus on the implementation study. We completed phase 1 in the spring of 2021. The final report is a part of this presentation that we want to share with you on, and by all means, please ask questions throughout. For phase 2 is going to be conducted in fiscal year 2022, and that may look into some of the maintenance requirements associated with zero emission fleet, which is quite different from a diesel fleet. Also, the evaluation of utility grid infrastructure and efficiency to make sure there's enough power to charge buses, total cost of ownership, and initial zero emission bus project analysis. And a big upcoming project will be the pre-design of the DASH facility expansion project, when they're currently in the consultant selection phase. And the third phase for this will be incorporating the zero emission bus implementation study recommendations into the facility expansion project, which will be exciting to see. So next slide. So overall, we had 5 key project goals throughout the lifespan of this project. We're reduce facility design risk as much as possible wherever we can, identify and summarize infrastructure needs, potential to impact the expansion. So that's looking at the charging infrastructure, also the utility requirements that are needed. Produce a solution that works with the Dash's $8.1 million budget so that they're getting the highest rate of return. And then focus on 100% zero emission bus transition by 2037. Zero emission bus that can include battery electric bus or hydrogen fuel cell. The main focus is zero tailpipe emissions. And then last but not least, continue operations at the existing facility throughout the construction phase. So we're maximizing service as much as possible. So with that, the next slide. So with this, I'll hand it over to Mark, who's going to walk us through the existing conditions of the Dash bus facility.
So most of you have probably, thanks, Steph. Most of you have been in your facilities. This is the plan of it. Your long business center drive. Your buses come in and enter in off of Business Center Drive, take a left, and they park inside the bus parking area facing to the west. North is up on this slide. What we're showing is the purple and green buses. Those are your initial battery electric buses, and it indicates that you currently have actually the capability of charging up to 12 buses. So we had to take that into consideration. Next slide. We also looked at your fleet projections, and as has already been noted, you're starting with the zero emission buses that actually should be the other way around, but you're looking at by FY37 being fully zero emission bus operation. And we're looking at, you currently have 12 dispensers, and at some point you're going to need to add additional dispensers in order to accommodate the growth in your zero emission fleet. As I think Raymond said, in order to be 100% zero emission by 2037, you're going to be procuring only zero emission buses after 2027. So that's coming up pretty quickly. Let's look at the next slide. Just give you a very quick overview so that we're all using the same terminology. The charging infrastructure requires transformers. That's usually provided by a power company, in this case, Dominion. That power goes into switchgear. The transformers and switchgear, that's electrical equipment that everybody's familiar with. We've had that for years. The two things on the right of that is the charging cabinet and the dispenser. In this case, we're showing an overhead dispenser being a pantograph. And what that means is that when the battery electric bus pulls underneath it, the pantograph reaches down, touches the bus, and starts charging the bus. I just wanted to note that the charging cabinet and the charger, the pantographs, those are all technologies that are very, very quickly evolving. They are existing. It's equipment that has been installed, but they're constantly upgrading it. And that's important to note as we move forward in the presentation. Just to give you a next slide. You've probably seen this, but the picture in the upper left-hand corner is a ground-mounted plug-in configuration, and that is actually a picture inside your facility. This is a very typical way of going about charging your buses in an initial battery electric bus configuration. But as you can see, you've got to deal with cords, and with the plug-ins, somebody's got to plug it in. At some point, somebody's got to unplug it. That works very well with a smaller number of buses. But as you grow, or as your zero emission fleet grows, what we're finding is that we're looking at overhead opportunities, and that can either be drop-down cords, which still require plugging in and unplugging, or the pantograph, which actually has a lot of opportunities that we could discuss or answer any questions that you have. Going to the next we looked at various ways of expanding your facility, because as your fleet grows, you can get, I think, 96 buses in your current fleet, but as it grows, you're going to have other places to park your buses. And one place is you could expand in the center of your current parking area. This is a zero capital cost expansion item or option, and it can be combined with any other ones, but you can only expand another 12 buses. Next slide. We looked at 3 other ways of expanding your facility to the north, the south, and the west. Frankly, the north and the south don't work well. Number one, it's not going to give you enough buses for your expansion. The north expands into the hill. There's been some issues with drainage in that area. Expanding to the south would expand directly over Business Center Drive. And finally, to the west, it's interesting to note that all of your buses exit out of that west end and leave the site from there, or during the evening, they have to exit out of there and go through fuel and wash and return back to bus parking. So one of the things that, Sev mentioned, one of the primary goal, or one of the goals, is that you have to continue operations throughout construction. And we really couldn't figure out a way to exit all of your buses, your entire fleet, through a construction area while you're expanding to the west. So if we go to the next slide, what we're suggesting is that the expansion take place just immediately to the west of your existing facility, actually to the west of your drive. This would be in the area where the police impound lot currently is located, and you also have some of your surplus buses located there. What this does is it will give you the expansion that's needed. What's shown here is an expansion area of 40 buses, 40 standard 40-foot buses. I'd also like to note that as your fleet grows, your maintenance capacity also needs to grow. And so we were asked to look at what the impacts might be there. And so you can see in the bus parking area, I'm pointing at it, but I know you can't see it there. It's, as you're looking at having up to 15 articulated buses, thank you. Up to 15 articulated buses. Those are 60-foot buses, which do not fit in your current 40-foot bays without taking 2 of the bays. And so what we're proposing is that you have an opportunity to build those articulated bus maintenance bays in the area where some of your buses are parked today, and still provide the parking that you need for your expanded fleet. Next slide. This shows you what the fleet would look like in 2037, with the light blue buses being your articulated coaches. Let's go to the next slide. This gives you a detail of the proposed expansion. In this case, west is up. But what we're proposing is that you have 40 buses parked in, they're basically rows of 20, 2 deep. And that Business Center Drive is on the left-hand side, that you'd have your new Dominion transformers located along Dominion Drive where the power feeds come in from. And then actually have a deck, a framework around the buses or over the buses with a deck. Let's go to the next slide. It'll show you a picture's worth 1,000 words. So you can see that with this framework, the buses would park underneath it. This is something that we've developed and utilized this concept in a number of places around the country. It seems like most transit agencies are very similar to DASH, in that land is pretty valuable, and it's difficult to find space for the chargers and the switchgear and transformers and everything. So this solution actually allows you to put the chargers and switchgear up over the top of the buses, and that also reduces or minimizes the conduit runs from those chargers to the pantographs. We did a little bit of cost analysis. Well, before we get into that, go to the next slide. This gives you some detail. I do want to point out that you notice where the inverted pantographs are. Those little red areas. Yes, those are hanging on. You notice that there's a major framework and then lighter framing that's 5 foot on center that will allow you to relocate these pantographs if you ever need to. You notice that all of this is above ground. Many of the installations, including your existing installation, are all underground. So if you needed to make any changes, it would require tearing up the concrete. And what this does is gives you a lot of flexibility. A little later, we can talk to you a little bit about some other opportunities. The chargers that you see here at 2 to 1, that means that for every charger, that would charge or would power up 2 of these pantographs. So the charging technology and the pantograph technology is changing very quickly, and there's actually some options that we might be able to further reduce some of the cost that this solution would entail. Next slide. These next 2 slides just show you an elevation, so you can see, looking from the west, what this would look like. You can see the pantographs reach down and touch the buses. All of the charging equipment switchgear is up above the buses. The nice thing about that is that all the conduit coming out of there is above, outside of the areas where buses are driving or where drivers are walking. So it's a very, very safe solution to this. And it also, you're very tight on space. And so we're not taking up ground space for the chargers and the switchgear. Next slide.
Oh, sorry, one other thing too, Mark, here. With these concepts, looking at the budget, it shows that the roof is only partially covering some of the buses, but the roof can actually cover the entire width of the buses. So that's important to note as far as weather and so forth.
Thank you, Sal. The next slide, the reason why we're expanding or recommending this expansion, next slide, is that it's easily scalable. It can be developed in phases as your funding is available. It really maximizes the use of your available funding for this first initial phase. This approach lends itself to a number of different project delivery methods, and we understand that you have not selected a delivery method at this point, but you could do this with design bid build, you could do design build. We could talk all night about automated bus yards, but SEV is our national leader in spearheading the development of automated bus yards. There are some opportunities probably in the next 6 to 8 years that rather than moving buses with drivers through your facility, they can be done automatically. And one of the things we try and do is future-proof our facilities and not close any doors artificially. So what's being proposed would allow you to consider automated bus yards in the future. We think it makes the best use of your available space. And by putting all of this overhead, as that technology evolves, you would be able to respond to it very easily without having to tear up any concrete. And it'd be easy to modify the facilities or to take advantage of that emerging technology as the fleet grows. So I'm sure as board members, you're interested in the cost, which is the next slide. We understand you have about $8.2 million available from a couple of different sources. And so we looked at what the cost would be to provide 40 charging stations plus the full framework. Clearly, that's beyond what you can do with your current budget. So we backed that down to basically building the entire framework. We looked at it either with a partial concrete platform or doing the full platform. And we think you would be able to afford having the full framework with the full platform what that means is that your buses would be fully covered, okay, and protected from the weather. And you would have 20 charging dispensers initially that would accommodate your buses, your fleet growth out until about, let's see, about FY26. And so that's the approach that we're recommending. Second to last slide, we go to the implementation plan. You've got the bus or your facility expansion project really needs to be completed by FY23, and that would include 20 charging dispensers. The next year, complete the expansion for maintenance. Then be looking for additional funding, have that funding in place for 20 additional dispensers that would be added in FY26. And at that point, you actually have enough charging capacity to be able to charge your entire battery electric bus fleet. But what you would have to do is incorporate or utilize what we call platooning or automated bus yard. And basically what that means is you would charge your buses with the, it would be the 40 new ones plus the 12 dispensers that you currently have. So you'd have 52 chargers. And each of those charging dispensers would be able to charge 2 buses a night, but you'd have to move the buses around. If you decided you did not want to move the buses around, then you'd be looking for additional funding and then put that additional charging capacity in the existing bus parking area. We've looked at the existing bus parking area. It will accommodate that additional charging. So with that, the last slide, I apologize for going through so quickly here, but what we're recommending is that you use the inverted overhead pantograph dispensers. That what this would do would be expand your charging infrastructure while still using your existing 6 chargers and 12 plug-in dispensers. So you've already made an investment in there. Let's continue to use that investment throughout this program. And then expand the facility as an outdoor covered space for up to 40 40-foot buses in 12-foot wide spaces. That's what was depicted there. Design it to accommodate future opportunities like automated bus yard, develop 2 maintenance bays to accommodate the RTICs, and to follow the implementation plan we just talked about as you move forward. So I feel a bit like the Federal Express commercial and talking so fast, but if anybody has any questions, our team would be glad to address those.
Mark, could you speak very briefly to how this concept and framework would be able to accommodate energy banking if that is considered in the future?
That's a great point. Can you go back to the image? Keep going. One more. Okay, you might go back one more from that. We developed this image with just the partial deck. That way you could see below. But the deck would go over the entire area. And then what Raymond is talking about is that there are some real opportunities to put solar power on here. And we're doing that with a number of transit agencies to help offset some of the cost for your power. Phil, I'm sure would like to talk a little bit more about that because there's some real opportunities. We did not include the cost of the solar power as a part of that $8.2 million. But Phil?
Yes. So solar power now has come down in cost so much that it really is the cheapest source of electrons for you. But even if we cover this whole area, it won't make enough power for all the buses that are underneath. So we've looked at those analyses for lots of different agencies before, but it still makes sense to, as much as possible, put solar panels on top of this roof possibly also on top of the employee parking lot. And that provides you with some low-cost electricity that you can use now that you're going to start becoming a much bigger electricity user. There's also some opportunities to potentially look at adding batteries to that system, stationary batteries. That's still expensive, but there are more grants available for that sort of thing, since it's the kind of technology that's coming down in cost and everybody's very interested in funding that sort of thing. So, so we'll be on the lookout for additional energy strategies like that to help you out in the future.
And something really quickly, just to keep in mind before we get into questions that was mentioned earlier, this industry is changing very quickly. You know, there's less than 3,000 zero emission buses on the market. You know, there's over 60,000 transit buses in the United States. And so those are some good numbers to keep in mind as far as, you know, there's still a lot of room left for this technology to advance, also for cost to come down.
It's like you have two hands up. One is Jim Capsis. I saw go up first, and then Matt Harris.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks to the team for the presentation. I've got a bunch, so I'll do a few and then let Matt jump in, and we'll so I'll take a little time. I was curious, one of the earlier slides, I can't remember the dates because it went pretty quickly, about when the initial tranche of, I think, half of the chargers would be installed, and I seemed like it was early relative to, or actually, sorry, where the full number of chargers would be installed by 2028, even though we'd only be at about half of the transition on the bus side. And I would just love to understand the logic behind, you know, assuming we're going to install that many charging stations that early. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but it just seems a little odd to have that much capacity that quickly, given the useful life of the infrastructure, which of course, because the technology is changing, that also may change over time.
Yep, thanks for the question. So Mark, Mike, do you guys have any thoughts on that as far as how we're looking at the phasing of the charging infrastructure?
Yeah, unfortunately, we got these two lines up at the top reversed, but the number of zero emission buses is actually under the line non-zero emission. So you've got 6, you're going up to 14 and so forth. So what we're looking at is that by 2025, actually about FY24, you'd be, no, I'm sorry, FY23 is when your expansion is going to be developed. And at that point, you're going to have, you'll have 14 zero emission buses and 12 dispensers. And then from there, it starts growing pretty quickly. So by putting another 20, so the number of dispensers that are needed here, you've got 4, 12, back up to this point. When you build those 20, you'd still be able to have a dispenser over each one of your buses and not have to move them. You notice one of the things that happens here is that when you get up to 14 buses, you're already going to have to start moving buses around because you've only got 12 dispensers. So one of the things we were doing here was trying to maximize we were balancing what your current budget is and give you the most flexibility. And what we think is happening here is that you could build the entire framework, cover all of your buses, and then provide up to 20 dispensers. And that would carry you out to about this point here, before you would need to have additional, with those 20, you'd be able to get to about this point.
Which point? I can't see any
I'm
point.
pointing at it, I apologize.
Yeah.
You'd be able to get out to about FY25. At that point, you'd need to have funding and then install the additional 20 so that the total number of, or the number of existing dispensers and the new number of dispensers you need. That would be 12 existing one plus 20. So you need to have this expansion done by about 2023. And then at that point, you're going to be at, let's see, 12, 40, you need to go to 40 dispensers by FY28 in order to have, if you don't do that, then you're going to have to platoon buses around. So.
But don't we have to platoon buses around
simple-
anyway? That's what I'm trying to understand. We have to platoon buses anyway, like eventually, right? Because you have a fixed state of 40 dispensers. Am I reading this, or 52? Is that right? 52 dispensers? I can't figure out how to read this. You say,
yeah, I'm sorry. It's
existing dispensers needed. That can't be right, because it's not. You're not adding it all every year. That's a static number, I'm assuming. It's 40.
Actually, the number of existing dispensers stays the same. You've got 12 dispensers now. We would continue to use those throughout. And then what we're showing here is you would not, this is what's needed. It's not what you would build. And so what we're suggesting is that when you build this expansion by FY23, you can afford to take care of up to 20 dispensers there within your budget. And the thought is that you go ahead and put in those 20, that'll take care of you up until FY25. And then at that point, you'd either need to start moving buses around or add another 20 dispensers. And you've already got the framework built to take those 20 dispensers.
We can also follow up with additional information to the board as well if it.
Yeah, so we got the full report 45 minutes before the meeting, so I haven't had a chance to read it. So apologies. Let me, one more question. I'll turn over to Matt. How have you thought about managed charging? You talk about moving, moving the buses and having to rotate, but there are a lot of assumptions behind that. And I also, from a cost perspective, there's a lot of discussion in the market about, bringing down the cost of the, of the infrastructure you actually need if you're using software to manage your charging, and you are moving buses at the right time or charging a different bus at different amount at different times that are actually all connected. And is that something you guys have looked at already? And any insights would be helpful.
Yeah, so that wasn't a part of the scope as far as looking at the service requirements and in comparison to the charging infrastructure. So we agree with you as far as that being looked into a little bit further. Mark has mentioned there's a charger to dispenser ratio of 1 to 2, but we anticipate the ratio to increase over time as well. So that's going to allow you to decrease the number of chargers that you'll actually need. And then also, I think what you're alluding to, the charge management software, it's really maximizing the chargers you have against your service requirements. So you're able to stagger buses more efficiently as far as when you actually need the power, right? But the biggest thing there on the software is great, but you also need your utilities to be on board.
Well, right. But that's the big also question though, because of course the utilities will be incentivized potentially to overbuild the capacity that the building has, so you can put as many chargers as possible in, when actually in reality you don't need as much as much capacity as they want you to have in there.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we can talk offline. I don't want to wait. There's a lot of folks I'm going to bore them to tears if we go too deep right now. So I'm happy to ask you guys offline.
I'm 100% on board with what you're saying, and it's something we're actively fighting against our local utilities in many jurisdictions around the country for these projects. And I'm actively talking with some vendors about bidding into the PJM markets with demand response opportunities, things like that, that will keep the cost of your power down for Dash, as well as keep those interconnection costs low. So
great. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Jim. And you probably know what I'm going to talk about, Jim. First, I want to say thank you for the presentation, and I'm jealous of the job and stuff you get to do every day. I have two concerns. One is my battery in the computer just warned me that I hadn't even plugged it in. So I'm always on the verge of having power anxiety issues. So with that said, I want to focus in on future proofing. And you mentioned something that's near and dear to me, and Jim knows this as well, is is you mentioned the use of hydrogen fuel cells, which I think is a gold standard for the future. I mean, the technology is great. You don't have the power range issues that we have. Obviously, there's an initial expenditure of capital that needs to be done in the distribution of the hydrogen itself, although I think you can create it on your own. So you mentioned that, is that one of your technology plans that you've got going forward for us? And then number two, in a non-related, but also related to future-proof, do you envision down the road that like there'll be regional transportation, i.e. transit hubs where like WMATA and Fairfax Rex and Arlington will have, will come together and have major recharging stations that we would all sort of share the economies of scale and then go out from? Or is it just going to be confined to where we are, off of Duke Street?
So I can jump in and respond a little bit to this, Ev, if that's okay.
Yep.
So to the first question, this project was not scoped with hydrogen fuel cell being considered. Just, kind of side channel on that though, we're doing some other studies for your neighbors and across the US for hydrogen fuel cell. The real struggle there is actually getting access to that hydrogen and then storing that hydrogen. This site wouldn't come anywhere near close to holding the amount of hydrogen you'd need basically for a day's operations. You'd have to be trucking it in and pretty much filling the buses mobily. It's a massive infrastructure. So until that gets scaled down a little bit, which will probably happen over time, it's a huge struggle. It's not as, we all look at it thinking it's kind of just like diesel, you plug it in and you go. We're not there yet based on the way that you have to store that. Also, since it's a refrigerated, gas. One other struggle you'd have is your existing facility is not built for lighter than air fuels. So it has a lot of areas in there that hydrogen would be able to get up into, get trapped. You can mitigate that, but it has pretty severe costs. It's been done elsewhere, and sometimes they just put it in, one or two bays, but since Dash utilizes indoor storage of your buses, your parking, it's a much larger challenge, a lot more square footage. So certainly something to consider, but there are some big operational challenges for Dash on hydrogen fueling. Jumping to your next question, for that kind of regional shared charging usage, I absolutely have seen that coming down the line. It's more currently for the on-route charging, but I'm working on a study for Solano County out in California, and they are actually going to be, I think it's 6 agencies that are going to try and utilize shared induction charging out on their routes at some of their transit centers. So that's coming down the line. We know the agencies are going to start working together. It'll probably mostly be pantograph. Typically, the induction's a little bit of an odd bird on that, but that's the route they're going. But shared charging is coming. We're working on how the charging manufacturers can track how much power is being used by who. And then one of the most difficult parts, schedule is king in transit. We got to make sure the buses actually run on time. So if one operator is running a little bit late and you've got a opposing agency trying to get to that charger, we need to make sure it's there. So all of that comes back to that charge management, scheduling, making the software work. But the hardware is going to work, and we expect that to be a viable use case. So it's a great question.
Yeah, thank you for that answer.
Go back a little bit on the slides. Right there. We're just finishing up a major task for TriMet. And it's the most comprehensive look at using fuel cell electric buses and hydrogen anywhere in the country. The largest user right now is AC Transit, and we've worked with them. They've got 21 buses. What TriMet has asked us to do is look at what is the implication if we use fuel cell buses on almost 700 of our buses, and what does that do when we take our fleet to 1,000? And we looked at both generating on site as well as delivering for liquid hydrogen. As a matter of fact, right before this presentation, I was making a presentation to their executive directors on this. And it's pretty incredible how large the footprint is for that equipment. The reason I wanted to go to this slide is that you literally have no place to put that. And so what you'd have to be looking at is to the north and purchasing some property up there, or some place to put that. For the liquid hydrogen, that's where most people, AC Transit got into this first off, and they were generating hydrogen on site. They have now shifted to taking deliveries of liquid hydrogen. It's a much smaller footprint, but the cost per kilogram is significantly higher. Okay? The issue is that both with hydrogen fuel cell and with batteries, what we've got is we've got three boats. I like to say it's three boats on a lake. There's the operators, meaning like you guys. There's the manufacturers for the bus. And then there's the energy providers, whether that's liquid hydrogen or battery electric. All three of those groups are going to have to rise at the same level as the water rises, okay? Meaning that, for instance, the work that we're doing right now with LA and converting over 3,000 buses to battery electric, if they put in their order today, they would take all of the manufacturing capacity for the next 5 years and nobody else would get a bus. So, and when you look at where you can get liquid hydrogen, the network simply is not there. And so as you ask about, can agencies get together? If you and WMATA and Fairfax got together and said, this is a route we want to take, and then you went to one of these suppliers and said, we're going to be looking at 10 metric tons of need for liquid hydrogen, you'd get their attention. They'd start looking at developing a plant, but nobody's at that point just yet. So does that all make sense? Okay, thank you.
Matt, one quick thing. I'd like to offer a bit of clarification. The exploration of fuel cell or hydrogen fuel cell was actually part of the scope. And you'll see that it was examined on page 14 of the final report. You should have in hand. It was part of the scope, however, as you've heard, and it was just determined that it was just highly infeasible early on in the process. So it wasn't it wasn't considered much as far as concept development.
Yes, my apologies. The remediation of it was not considered here, so my terminology is no good. Sorry about that, Raymond.
Any other questions?
I would certainly say, apologies to the board for the delay in the final report getting to you. What I would offer is, as you take a look at that, if there are questions you have come up or additional conversation we can facilitate for you with the team here, or if we need to bring the team back at a later meeting for follow-up, we certainly will do that. This is an ongoing process. I certainly thank the team for the hard work on it, and there's just a lot of moving parts here, and we want to make sure that we do this right in the best way possible, but also that we're leading the way. And I'm proud of the fact that we continue to lead the way regionally and apparently nationally. And I think that's certainly garnering quite a bit of attention, for better or worse, in the context of how we're going to kind of have to learn a few lessons here and there as we go.
Yep.
Yeah, just and if there's no more, if there aren't any further questions at this point, I'd like to summarize by just outlining the next steps. So at this point, we essentially concluded phase 1 of the implementation study. We are expected to be funded for phase 2 of the implementation study. So we expect to get that kicked off and completed sometime within fiscal year 22. Concurrently, as mentioned, we are also in the solicitation process for the Dash facility expansion pre-design. So there's, like Josh mentioned, there's a lot of moving pieces. They're all happening concurrently, and we have to work hard to make sure everything's in rhythm and in sync with each other.
And certainly there, I think, and Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a procurement element to that second phase that will come into play. So that will have to move through the process as well, as to, you know, who continues that portion. Is that right?
I'll defer to Evan on that. He may know more than I do.
Yeah, that's correct. We have a contract option that we can exercise relatively quickly, or we could put it back out, and that's to be determined.
Okay. Well, not seeing any immediate questions, I will thank the team for joining us for this conversation. And again, encourage members, you know, of your respective interests, please let me know. We'll make sure we facilitate the answers and follow up to those questions as well as any further discussion. And thanks to Ray for continuing to take these projects on. And we're excited to continue to see electric buses rolling in here to the facility and out there on the streets. So
yep.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that concludes, apologies for my lengthy presentation this evening, but the remaining ones are fairly short. So we'll turn it back over to you to move to our next part of our meeting.
I think Evan's ready. He's got his mic on.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my report begins on page 14 of the board packet. I'll be very brief this evening. We ended April with a deficit of just over $1 million, and that's entirely because it was a 3 payroll month. And we also had some large expenditures where we actually paid the bill and moved the cash out during the month. Our year-to-date surplus remains about $2.2 million, and that's because we have already received into the Dash Fund all $6.1 million of allocated CARES Act transit relief funds, which are helping us out not only this fiscal year, but into fiscal 22. Our projected surplus at the end of fiscal 22, which is just about 3 weeks away, is about $1.5 million. We're tracking right on pace for that at the moment. You know, projection gets easier and easier as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. What we're going to do is work with the accounting division under Ian and his team to reclassify that as deferred revenue at year end. So then it will become available for use as one of our budgeted revenue sources in fiscal 22. So that's really the big picture. Nothing has changed from what I've told you in the past couple of months. In April, our passenger revenue was slightly above projection as it was in March. We don't know May yet. We should get that any day now, but that's encouraging. You know, our ridership continues to be around the 40 to 45% of pre-pandemic levels, and revenue has come back correspondingly. A couple other small things in April. You know, our parts expense has been a little bit higher, both because of an inflationary trend in prices and also because we strategically increased stock in certain areas so that we can respond to buses that need to be fixed more quickly and more strategically. So our inventory value has gone up about $100,000 year over year, and that is adjusted as part of the year-end accounting close. And since we're talking about inventory, I would just note that we audit that on a monthly basis, where my team goes down and does a random, you know, audit with the team. And I can tell you that our parts department does an exceptional job of maintaining very high level of accuracy in our inventory records, and our audits have reflected that. So that's all that I would share with you tonight. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
All right, Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 items from the planning department this evening, both of which are informational items, and we are not requesting board action for either. The first item is item 6A. This is a report on a survey that the Dash staff have conducted of other transit agencies that have had experience with free fare programs prior to the COVID pandemic. This was based on a board discussion from last month. So during the past month, Dash staff have been able to interview 3 different transit agencies that have experience with free fares, including DDOT and their DC Circulator, which was fare free in 2019, as well as Baltimore's Charm City Circulator and Corvallis, Oregon, and their transit system, both of which have had fare free programs for over a decade. So I won't go into too much detail on this since the hour is late. Pages 18 and 19 of your packet provide a lot of the findings. I would just note that this kind of fits in well with our fare free framework, because the fare free framework is kind of looking at the long-term approach and strategy as to how we're handling free fares. This is talking about more the immediate short-term implementation, some of the logistical challenges of that relating to operations, safety, customer service and outreach, and just trying to learn some lessons from people that have been through it before. So you'll find that we've listed some of the findings in page 18 and 19. I would just generally say that most of the staff that we interviewed reported positive overall experiences with their fare-free programs. We did note that all the programs we surveyed had increases in ridership ranging from 26 to 59%. In response to Ian's question from earlier, none reported significant issues with overcrowding. And I would also say that I think we're pretty well positioned as we're still recovering from the pandemic. We're still around 45% of ridership levels. So I think we're well positioned to have the capacity over the next year to handle any increases that we might see. That said, we will be closely monitoring ridership on all trips and all routes to see if any adjustments are needed. Any questions on any of the findings that are listed in the packet?
Martin, I have a very quick question. I know you referenced the 11Y in the packet in Metro's discussion of renewing that or restoring that service. A resident asked me about 11Y and said, this would be a great opportunity for Dash to pick up like direct service into downtown DC. I told him I doubt that would be feasible if we could even do it. And then, the fare aspect, since we don't have fares, how would we justify doing that? We could never have a mixed one route being fare driven and the other fare free. Is that correct?
Hard to say on the second question. I think that would, that would be a discussion that we would need to have as part of our free fare framework. But in regards to the first question, that would need to be likely a regional route just due to the nature of the route. We are able to operate to the Pentagon, but a route that goes into DC like that would kind of be more interjurisdictional and would likely fall under WMATA's purview based on our arrangement with them. I can just to make sure we're clear, the 11C is operating. It actually started operating a couple days ago. And that is meant to be mostly a replacement for the 11Y. It operates along the same routing from Mount Vernon all the way up into Old Town. The only difference is that instead of continuing north of Old Town into DC, it hangs a left and goes to the Braddock North Metro. So not quite as a direct route, but that is what they've offered for now. And they may resume 11Y in the future, but that's not something they're offering right
now. Right, Martin, I had a question on the surveys of the other agencies and was particularly interested in the agencies that had implemented restrictions on what you could bring onto buses. I think we call it the one rider, one seat rule. And just wondering, because I do understand the necessity of looking at that and making sure that aisles are free and that it is safe for passengers to navigate to the bus and get to exits. But when we look at things like luggage, because we do perhaps more than some of these other systems, we're providing service, connecting to Metro where people are going to the airport or the Amtrak station. And so, what reaction your team had to those observations and changes you might make, or how we will manage someone who is bringing on a lot of belongings versus someone who's bringing on 2 suitcases?
Yeah, that's a great question. I might respond initially and then might have Stephanie Salzone, our Director of Safety and Security, weigh in as well if she has anything. I think that's one of the key decision points that we have to make coming out of this. I think that of the agencies, there was only one that had instituted that policy. And it sounded like that was a more of a strict interpretation of the policy. I think there's going to be a more subjective.
Which one was that?
That was Corvallis was the one that had the one rider, one seat policy. I think there need to be some specific training and tips offered to operators in their training for this. And I think that, there have to be some subjectivity to some extent, and just ensuring that I think the main thing is that other passengers were not being disrupted and that the operations would not be disrupted. But Stephanie, are you still on? Do you have any other thoughts on that issue?
Martin, you answered it well. I would just say that, it is a sensitive subject. So, we'll work through that very carefully when we decide to make a decision on whether we institute that policy or not, but you answered it well.
What is our policy now?
I don't think we have a well-defined policy in terms of luggage. I mean, in terms of strollers and scooters, it has to be folded before you go on the bus so they can fit into the seats, but we don't have a strong luggage policy as far as I know.
Okay. I mean, also in consideration of shopping, for example, I have a shopping cart that folds, but when it's filled with groceries or other items, and bringing that in, and, I typically sit in the seats that, basically face across from each other and have it as close to the seat so that the aisle is passable. But, I just would want us to think very carefully, and it sounds like you are, about, if we're making changes to that, because I guess we're carrying more, because the implications we're carrying more passengers, and people might just be riding the bus for the purposes of riding the bus for getting out of the weather. And, making sure that we can try to strike the right balance there, I think is very important. And, maybe, and too much subjectivity could also be problematic, because you'll have operators then that are interpreting that differently and leading to complaints. But the survey was very helpful. I did note that there seemed to be one system that was not happy with the APCs and the results that they were getting. So we're purchasing these, but we may want to look more. I think that was Charm City, the Baltimore system. So I think we might want to look into that a little farther and make sure that, that was an isolated issue with some of the equipment they got versus, what we're investing in, because we're going to be relying on those to give us the appropriate data. But yeah, this was a good start, and I think you picked good systems to survey as well, just in terms of being comparable to us.
Okay. If it pleases the board, I'll move on to item 6B, which is a brief summary of our latest on the new Dash network implementation. As Chairman Kaplan noted, this is the next time that the board convenes, we will be 3 days into the new Dash network. So this is our last meeting before that launch. So I just wanted to provide a brief summary of where we're at in terms of our implementation efforts. As I noted, I think at a previous meeting, we've got 5 different working groups that are meeting monthly, if not more frequently, and have been so since the fall, to kind of work out all the logistics. I provided a summary of each of those groups on page 20 of your packet, so you can review that and let me know if you have any questions. The one thing I did want to highlight is that we are in the initial stages of planning an event. Well, there'll be a couple events, but hopefully one significant event right around the launch of the network on September 5th. I should note the network launches on September 5th, Sunday, September 5th. However, that is Labor Day weekend. So it does present some challenges in terms of having an event with people traveling and just not being available. So we'll be working with the board and other VIPs to see when we can arrange to schedule an event to give the proper due to this the start of this new network. So more info to come on that, but just wanted to flag that for the board's awareness. Happy to take any questions on any of these new Dash network updates.
This is good. I just one quick question. I appreciate that we're looking at the improvements to key bus stops. Is there I know the city has a budget for refurbishing bus shelters at the very least, but was there any money that was set aside specifically for, and I guess I don't think through our budget, but any money that was set aside by the city specifically for improvements, or is it more looking at things like signage as opposed to the amenities that are at the stops when you are looking at improvements?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, the majority of the bus stop improvements that we're looking at doing are going to be along the commuter choice routes, and part of the funding from the commuter choice program is designated for those capital improvements to bus stops. So a good number of those improvements will be based on the commuter choice fund. We do have 1 or 2 stop improvements that will be funded by the city. I would also note that they are in the process of a an RFP for bus shelter design, renewed bus shelter, and they do have some funding identified for the next couple of years to install some additional shelters, both replacements and new shelters. So the city is putting some skin in the game as well.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have an executive session, which I promise will be very quick. And so we need a motion, which is on the screen in order to close the public meeting and begin the executive session. So if somebody would go ahead and read that.
Chair, I hereby move that the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing legal and personnel matters pursuant to section 2.2-3711 paren A1 close paren of the Code of Virginia.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ian, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're gonna wait for staff to close the meeting and then we'll conduct our session.